Hi folks, I'm Ken Knowlton. I've come to talk about Ted Nelson and, among other things of course, his computer lib and dream machines. When I was looking at this the other day, I just noticed that on the very first page there's a quote from Ken Knowlton. I don't remember whether I paid him for that. If I did, what an investment. If I didn't, what an honor. Anyway, that's an incredible book in its time. By that time, Ted had met more than a dozen people in computerdom and in computer arts, a dozen times as many that I had, and he has continued to meet people and to gather things. At this point, he has a trove of documents, of files, of personal notes, of correspondence, of manuals and other books that would fill a boxcar. And he is and in his head he has probably just about as much stuff. And from his head and from his trove of things, he has produced this that I hope you have seen. If you haven't, take a look at it. This is Geeks Bearing Gifts. It's pretty much up to date now, and it has much, much more about people and all of the good or foul or disgusting or pleasant things they've done with computers, and a lot more information about people and projects. Another thing that I recommend is this Posiplex. This is something that may be a little bit difficult for you because it's his autobiography, and it's a bit egotistical, to say the least. But if there's anybody who deserves to have his thoughts and his personality expressed and assertion of his ideas, it's him, because he's got some pretty great ideas. So, what is the project? The project has to do with collecting, or not necessarily doing the job of collecting, but providing the tools by which people can collect information about the world's cultures. I mean, that's where the real understanding comes from. Why do we want to talk about understanding? Well, let me start by saying, why do Ted and I agree with each other? We seem to have the same sort of attitudes toward the world, and I think it comes in part from something that I learned just recently. I spent the first 17 years of my life on a small farm, and I just recently learned that he has spent a lot of time on a farm back and forth during his lifetime. And what does a farm give you? It gives you a feeling for nature, where the snow comes in the winter and it keeps the fields white. And they stay white from snowfall to snowfall. In the summertime the birds come, and there are animals in the woods, and there are trees to climb, and there's fresh air to breathe, and it's a springboard to a rich and vibrant world. And that, I think, is one of the things that we have in common. It just may be that that kind of starting and an energizing thing can produce similar people. At any rate, let me demonstrate the similarities by referring to Spinoza, who said for himself, Spinoza said, "I strive not to laugh at people's actions, not to weep for them, not to hate them, but to understand them." On those 4 points, Ted and I agree with each other, not necessarily with Spinoza. If this is a test, we each get 25% in the same way, I think. We do laugh at the actions of people, but with a rather tart sense of humor. We do, well, not exactly weep, but we despair and are so unhappy about people's actions, especially when they're destructive, when they are striving for short-term personal gain in terms of wealth and fame and power, and that rises even to hate when they are vastly destructive of the world around them and of other people. So, strike 4 no's, not with Spinoza. We do laugh, and we do despair, and we do hate, I think. But to understand, absolutely, to understand the world, that's where I think we both agree. And in a somewhat different way, to a somewhat different extent though, Ted not only wants to understand for himself by meeting all these people and analyzing what they're doing and saying yes and no and good and ugly, he wants other people to be able to understand by providing he's not going to help them to understand. There's too much. It's going to take thousands of librarians and historians to collect the stuff, but he wants to provide the tools. That's what Xanadu is about, to providing the tools of getting all of this stuff and its connectivity. What do I mean by connectivity? I mean, things refer to other things. Even individual words refer to other words, to sentences, to documents. And I said as my test, so could I make a list of 4-letter words from the starting with A, B, C, and so forth, and that somehow demonstrate this interactivity, this self-reference of language. And here's my list: acts, as in acts of a play; book; copy; data; echo; fact; game; hope; idea; joke; keys; laws; myth; note; oath; page; quip; roll; song; text; unit; view; word; pictures too; x-ray; yarn, and Z. I had trouble with Z. I had to look up a Scrabble dictionary. Z. Zine. This, if you didn't know, this is a zine of the mega sort. So, beyond words, think of bigger things like sentences, paragraphs, books, traditions, big things like a culture's religion, myths, legends, morals, customs, laws, songs, fairy tales, plays, in general stories of one sort or another, or metaphors or whatever, on to other modes, other means of expression, languages, in not beyond language, movies, or paintings, or sculpture. Things are connected and they refer to each other. In fact, some of the meaning is only meanings in terms of other things. Niels Bohr, for example, said the following about science. He said, "In our description of nature, the purpose is not to disclose the real essence of things, but only to track down, as so far as possible, the relations between the manifold aspects of our experience. How are things connected?" So, pointers from one thing to another for a variety of reasons. One reason has to do, for example, with versions. We have version 0.1, or the 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, 2.0, blah, blah, blah. We have versions of, for example, the Constitution of the United States. We have the original text, and we have amendments, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up through 10 immediately, and then others. And what does an amendment mean? It doesn't mean a replacement of the original Constitution. What it means is changes in a sense of an overlay. We keep the original, and then we have pointers that say that this part is obsolete, no more effective, this part is replaced by some other part, some amendments change the effect of other amendments, so we have all of these things, but we keep the pointers. We have pointers to sections that point to sections, that point to places where other sections are inserted or deleted, whatever. Pointers and pointers. We have pointers in the sense of, for example, a letter to an editor about a critique of a person's translation of something from one language to another, pointer down the chain. We have pointers galore from Google. Think of what that is. You put in a word or a phrase or a name, and it points to its own a priori connected list of things which are pointers that point, hopefully, to the thing that you were looking to find information about. It has other ones too. Lots of pointers point into things, and that I'd like to call a pincushion. Lots of pointers point out from things and that kind of thing I'll call a porcupine. Porcupines and pincushions. And most things are either a porcupine or a pincushion or both. Most things get pointers into them and get pointers out. So dealing with pointers is a real problem. Now, how many pointers? I asked Google, I say to Google, Knowlton's fast storage allocator, that was a 2-page paper in 1966. It comes back with a list, and on the top of the list it says 27,000. Well, I should feel good about that. And I must have started something, yes, but what am I going to do with 27,000 pointers to keep track of what my little thing was about? I put in the word Ted Nelson. What do you think it comes back with? It has a number on the top of the list. The number says 47 million. Or 40, maybe I've exaggerated, maybe I don't remember, 45 million, maybe, whatever. What difference does it make? At 1 per second, for me to read that list, 1, 2, 3, 4, it would take me day and night. It would take me a year and a half. As you know, there are pi times 10 to the 7th seconds in a year. It would take me a year and a half to read that list. That is too many. We need something that's more appropriate for each situation than just a smattering of pointers. What to do, how to do it. The thing to remember here, if you don't remember anything else, remember this sentence. No idea is an island entire of itself, including this one. Thank you, John Dunn and Doug Hofstetter. So how do you design a system that's going to give you everything you want? You want a system that's simple enough to understand and to build and to maintain and to protect, to explain and to be used. You want it complicated because you've got lots of features to put into it. And the more you work on it, the more features you want. That is one of the most troublesome of all of these details. You probably design it from the top down with, this is the biggest piece, this is the intent, these are the sub parts of that. You then build from the programmers who scurry around with letters and words and sentences and paragraphs and documents. From the bottom up, those are the things that are in this thing, and then the pointer structures and how to deal with them and keep track of them, and maybe pointers to pointers. How many kinds of pointers are there? There are pointers to documents, there are pointers to places in the Word, there are pointers, are there temporary pointers, are there individuals private pointers, are there privileged pointers, are there pointers that expire at a certain date? Pointers to pointers, is that part, is the whole pointer system itself part of history? Is it? If it is, then we've got another whole list on top of that, and that goes on in infinite regression. We can't do that. We've got to make some shortcuts, some compromises about how many pointers we have and what they mean and how they work. What this means is, in the process of building it, you decide, something's missing in the definition, in the structure, in the plan. Something is contradictory in the plan. Something is too simple, or it's too complicated. It should be changed because we have a new idea about this particular issue. So the whole structure of the thing gets wobbly and has to be controlled. And worst of all, you come to the place where some large thing has been built and you have to throw it away ultimately because the bank account is running low, time is running short, it's become too complicated, there are two or three issues you didn't realize the implication of, and you have to throw that away with not even a jazz funeral for it. The basic difference between Ted and me, one of them is that I bounced around from one kind of a project to another through computer hardware and software and computer art, and my attention span has only been a year or two or three. His has been slogging along and trying hard to make sense of this big thing about how the world's intellectual structure should be structured, how its intellectual property and records in history should be structured. And I admire him for that. I mean, he has really put a lot of energy and thought into it, and he's the one who does it because he's got in his head, as I say, and in his whole library of stuff, he's got a perfect example of things to be structured. So far, so good, but there's a real puzzle here. The puzzle goes like this. In this book, 40 years ago, at the very end of Computer Lib, he says, end game. And what he's talking about here is the ecology. Already, he says, in 1974, he says, we're in trouble, the world is getting overpopulated and overused. What are we going to do about this? Can we do anything about it? I mean, he was talking about stuff that is valid today, like back then, but I mean, he even saw it then. 20 years ago, it took me 20 years to get to the point where I wrote something like that on my website. It's called Great Day in the Evening, and I said in that, well, of all things, the internet is going to cause us trouble, besides all these other things. The internet is going to make things more fragile because more things depend on other things in complicated ways that we can't even see. It's a machinery and connectivity that we can't observe working, and it's too complicated for any of us to understand. And if it's chopped in one place in a serious way, a lot of things could crumble by cascade. A year ago, I had myself tuned in to the wider ecological problems, and I am about the point of giving up because they are extraordinary when you get them all together in one bunch and look at them. The only thing I could think of is something that will not happen, and that is to get all of the leaders, the real people who know how the world works, the historians, the psychologists, the economists, the business people, the politicians, get them together and cooperate, because the biggest question is, when we face the ecological problems, what's the main way people are going to interact? Is it going to be competition for what's left, or is it going to be cooperation, because that is absolutely what is required to come down in the softest way to get to sustainability in the best way, is to cooperate about that, to develop plans B, like triages and stockpiles and so forth. I'm proposing an organization whose initials are SSSSSSSSSSS, and it's kind of silly, isn't it? By sort of strange back transformation, that stands for strategists for a slower slide down the slippery slope to softer settling into a sane, stable, secure, sustainable society. What do you think the chances of that are? Not very good. So the puzzle is, why am I working on anything? Why is Ted still plugging along on this project? Well, I need a little sort of metaphorical answer to that, and I don't know whether you will agree with it or not, but I'll throw it out anyway. It's like the mathematicians I've heard who say, those who believe in God say that God has a book that has all the mathematical truths in it. Those who do not particularly believe or feel or think in terms of God say, nevertheless, that book exists. Well, I believe in a similar book. That's probably the book that Omar Khayyam's imagined finger writes, and having writ moves on. and it contains all of the history of everything that people have done and created, the marvelous and the ugly things that have happened, and it also includes all of the things in people's heads, the things that they hoped for, that they worked toward, that they valued, and the people and things they cared about. Those things always will have been valued and always will have been cared about. So, my tribute and toast to Ted Knowlton is, Ted, you have got a darn good bunch of stuff in that book already at this point. You are still adding to it. You are on a great track, Ted. Carry on.